All right, welcome to the Gateway API meeting for March 11th. We've got a fairly light agenda today, but thank you to everyone who's made it to today's meeting. If you don't mind adding your name to these attendees list, it helps us keep track of things a bit easier. Um, that said, going to jump right into the meeting. I actually don't know who added triage. If someone is at this meeting that wants to go through triage, we can. But otherwise, I think I'll just skip over that and go to 1.3. Cool. All right. So 1.3 is real, hopefully really close. First up, we have some discussion around the timeline. The Kubernetes dependency upgrade is blocked, waiting for the patch release, which, as far as I can tell, is scheduled for today. I haven't seen it go out yet, but by my math, it should be today. I tried to upgrade dependencies earlier and realized that there was a gap in register gen. I think one of the code gen tools that was introduced in this version of Kubernetes, and fortunately it had already been fixed. It just hadn't made its way back to this this cherry pick yet. So yeah, anyway. I've also blocked some time off in this week's SIG Network review, SIG Network meeting for SIG Network review. Usually before we release, we go through high-level API changes and get some feedback from SIG Network leads. This has gradually transitioned into more informational than something that really blocks our release, but we try and get it out before we actually release. So given that that's Thursday, the earliest that we would cut our release candidate would be after that meeting on March 13. But that still depends on how much help we get, because there's a bunch of open items that we haven't dealt with yet that could be in scope for this release, and wanted to spend some time talking about them today. So the first one is this. I don't know how we missed this, but we don't really validate the HB header value field at all. And I feel like, we should. So there's this discussion about what we could do. My suggestion is that even though this is a bug fix, because it's a breaking change, we should start this validation in experimental channel and then ratchet it up after it's lived in experimental for a little bit of time. I don't know. That may be too cautious, but it does feel like anything in GA where we're tightening validation, we should be real careful.
I would tend to agree with you on that, for the record.
Cool. The next one, I don't know if any of the people that were in the Slack thread are on this call, but there was what I found to be a very interesting Slack thread about this. And I still don't really know what to do with this, but my understanding via Slack is that it is valid. So basically, when we added this API, we said, hey, you can, everything needs to be unique. One of the characters can be a wildcard. Apparently, the wildcard has a different meaning, so it could be useful to have wildcard plus get and put, where I think the wildcard was, what was it? Unauthenticated. Wildcard meant unauthenticated requests, and then get and put or any other actual methods were on top of that. Some strange distinction that is covered in some obscure place somewhere. I don't see the right people on the call, but if this sounds familiar to anyone, I know there was a good thread in Slack about
Is
this.
that in spec or RFC or something, or is it in a particular?
Well, this is the awful thing about cores, as far as I can tell. There is no RFC. There is that the reference we've been going off of is this awful well, not awful, but MDN, right? Mozilla's
Okay, yep.
reference docs, which
Close enough
is
to a reference.
right, exactly. So let's see if I can pull this up.
I was
Yeah,
not
okay.
in that.
So
I was not in that discussion, but I would
wow, did I
really
did
like to see the document that they are saying should permit get star.
yeah, okay. So this is Elizabeth saying this. I don't know if this is really janky for everyone else.
Where, well, she says per the spec she linked above. Where's the spec she linked above?
It's I think she's linking to MDN still. Um,
Wait, wait.
oh no, this
What the hell is that?
yeah. Okay. So I'll link a way to this
Yeah,
in the
Candace,
agenda.
the MDN link that you did for access control allow methods is the one that says you are not allowed to mix get and a wild card.
Oh,
And
okay.
then what the hell is this thing? Oh, I've seen this page. I've seen this page before.
So
This page does
I
not
don't
help.
really, my yeah, this sounds familiar now that we're digging into it a bit further, that there was conflicting information between MDN and this this wonderful place. Um, my hunch is that it is safer to start with tighter validation, and this is tighter validation. And if
Mm-hmm.
we are confident in the future that we don't need this, we can pull it out.
That is usually wise.
Okay. So if there's no disagreement on this call, I think I will move forward with this. Cool. I'm going to call that good enough.
So did we not do any triage?
Oh,
I
you're
missed
the
the first
triage
name of it.
person.
We have to.
Yeah.
We're getting so backed up on triage. We have issues that are getting staled and rottened that never got responded to. So
Okay,
that's why
well, I'll come back
we-
to you at the end, and if you're still around, we can do triage.
Yeah, I was
Okay,
going to say, I looked at the board that was linked and figured that it was Shane because, wow, there's some stuff on that board.
It's not beautiful or perfect, but that board kind of gives you a sense of exactly how much stuff we have going on. It's a very busy project, and I think it's a good thing to look at that every once in a while and remember how much we have
Yeah.
going
on. Okay, yeah, we'll definitely go back to that shortly. The last issue that I think probably belongs or needs some resolution in this release is John's suggestion that our validation is tighter than it needs to be, which I think is accurate. But I need to. It needs someone to run through and find the correct regex that is slightly looser, but not so loose that we've opened it up too wide. So if anyone has some time, I would really appreciate some help dealing with this one. It does feel like it should be in the 1.3 milestone though. Okay, well, I will leave this one around for some time, but just a reminder that this release is blocked on getting some of these issues resolved, and so this one really could use an owner to help us actually get a release out the door. Also needed for release is a changelog. This, if you've been around the API fairly long, we have some documentation about how to create a baseline changelog that basically, so in our release.md file, there's some tooling that you can use to generate a baseline changelog. And then we usually go through that and tidy it up a bit and write some higher level overview of the major features. Usually not too bad of a process, but if anyone would like to volunteer, it would be great to have a changelog PR. Usually we take the changelog PR and turn that into the baseline of our release. And on a related note, I'll jump down below. Oh, it looks like Candace, thank you. Whenever we write a blog post for this, it often leans very heavily on the changelog, so these items are pretty closely related. I'll work on the actual API review. I've done that before. I don't mind doing it again. And then that leaves docs. I think most of our docs, oh, thank you, Candace. That leaves docs, and all the features that we have need some form of documentation. I have not seen documentation come through except for maybe listener sets. It's been a while, but I think Dave may have added some basic listener set documentation very early on. But not to pick on people. I see Eric and Mike for retries. Do either one of you want to own docs?
Yeah, I'm just wondering what the timeline is for this, or when it needs to be in by, just because I'm out for the rest of the week, but I could work on the docs on Monday, if that's okay.
Yeah, so let's say I need to pull up a calendar. So this doesn't block a release candidate, in my opinion. It does block our final release. So I would say that the target we had for our final release was March 24. So let's say March 21 that we want docs to be in by. And any delay there just, I think, delays our release.
Cool. All right, yeah, I can definitely work on that starting next week.
Awesome, thank you. Cores, I kind of took that over, so I definitely don't need to own documentation there. I don't see Liang on this list, but I can ask them as well if they're interested. But if anyone on this call happens to have time to own docs here, that would also be great. And then Dave, I saw you on the call. Do you remember if you already wrote docs for listener sets?
No, it's just a gap.
Okay. Do you have time to write docs in the next 10 days?
I guess should conformance tests come before docs, or is it just docs to highlight the feature?
Yeah, docs to highlight the feature is we don't require conformance tests for experimental, because usually it's helpful to have a reference implementation while you're writing conformance tests.
Okay. And then should I make it a guide, or is it a separate section under the guide section?
Yeah, it could be a guide section. We also have a API reference section. So unfortunately, I don't think we have a standard of what fits where, but you have the standard API types here. I think that is where I would start.
I mean, the API reference is kind of like the basic thing of like, we need something there, and then the guides is typically more of like a slightly higher level of like, why
How
would
would you
want
use
to
it?
use this? What do you do with it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I'll add it there to the tech reference.
Cool. Thanks, Dave. And then percentage-based request mirroring, I think this is a pretty tiny one, and it's just updating status of docs we already have. I don't see Lior on the call, but I will volunteer Lior for this one since he's done everything else. Yeah, okay. All right,
I'm sure
I think
he'll
that
be delighted.
I'm sure. Yeah. So with that, I think we're in an okay place. Reminder that if you happen to have some extra cycles and you see something in the O.3 milestone that does not have an owner, please, help us get this across the line. We would really like to get a release out soon. So yeah. All right. With that, Christine, I think you're up next.
Well, so this is just a little call to action. There's going to be a panel on the first day of KubeCon regarding Gateway API with a bunch of other maintainers, contributors. If you have any questions or specific questions you want answered on choosing your implementation and taming your traffic, you can go to that link and then you can look at the questions, vote on whatever you like the most, what you want to hear. And then if you have any suggestions, we'd love to hear them because we want to make this panel as useful as possible. And I'll also plug this into the Slack for later as well.
Ooh, that's a dangerous, dangerous thing to ask, Christine.
This is really, really cool.
It's good.
Great idea. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this is I should have, every panel should have something like this before it goes live. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that panel. Do you plan on having any time for questions from the audience, or just like, do you think you'll precede
We're
with
gonna
your
have
own
some,
questions?
yeah, we're gonna have some questions initially laid out because I think people are always a little shy to get up to the microphone,
Yes.
but after that initial warm up, we'll have open mic time as well.
Cool. Awesome.
Nice.
And then Flynn, Service Mesh Academy.
So every month, Buoyant does the Service Mesh Academy. And this month, we are doing Gateway API 101 with Linkerd because this is a Buoyant panel. I and Shane and Mattia will be doing that. I mention it here solely in case anyone wants to show up and heckle. I mean, participate. It should be interesting. It's wow, that's a terrible picture of me. I really need to have that removed. But tells you how often I look at that website, huh? But the point of Service Mesh Academy is often less about pimping Linkerd and more about trying to educate people. And one of the things that we've been doing in 2025 is trying to kind of go back and cover some of the basic concepts that often get missed. Seemed like Gateway API was a good opportunity there, or a good thing to cover. It's also a forum in which we try to go through and talk about gotchas as well as really cool things. So it should be a good time, as well as being a place where we have to try to be friendly to Gateway API. So, it should work out well.
Cool.
But yeah, if you're
I wish
interested,
I could
drop
make it
by.
to
I'd love to
that.
have you.
I'm
Likewise.
assuming it will be recorded, or
It will be recorded. They are all recorded. Feel free to go and look over all the other ones and let me know what you think.
if I were able to make it and I click this scary register button, am I going to get spammed for the rest of my life?
At worst, you will get things. Sorry, what was that, Mike?
Only until you click the unsubscribe link.
No, I mean, at worst, I think you end up getting. There's a possibility that you'll get email saying, hey, there's a new Service Mesh Academy coming, but that should be really low volume if it happens at all. I will check on that. actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will they be personal from you at least?
I think they'll
Like
be
I can-
personalized from Catherine.
Okay. Okay. That's
Yeah.
disappointing.
Well, I mean, we could fix that if that'll make you feel better about clicking the scary register button.
No, I might as well. Cool.
We try really. This is a much more serious comment than some of the rest of it. We try really, really hard not to flood people with email and be obnoxious and things like that. So it's a pretty common discussion around. Oh, we need to send it. Oh crap, we already sent email last week. Let's not do it until next week. You know, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. I appreciate that. All right, I think that means we've left some time for triage. I think the suggestion was to time box it to 15 minutes. And Shane, I don't know, since this is your
Yeah, it's a
board,
little bit of a mess, but it is mostly kind of accurate-ish. So the triage I've been manually doing. I need to automate it, but I've been manually just making sure, because we get so many issues that come in that then sit and then just die, and that's a horrible experience for people. Like when an issue comes in and goes stale botted with no response after like a few months. So I've been trying to make sure they all get marked in this column, and the hope is that we can start going through these and actually triaging things and seeing if they're things that we want to accept and try to move forward. We get a lot of things, however, so I do think that we will have to nicely probably say no to some things more often than not. I would rather us say nicely, I'm sorry, we won't do this right now unless we have, this criteria is met, than what we're doing to a lot of people right now, which is it just dies and then they see it go stale, rotten, dead. So it should be in reverse order, I think. If you look at the bottom, that should be, I think that's the oldest thing that we need to triage. It might be the other way, actually.
Yeah,
the other
this
way.
is the newest.
Top first. So top first, if we could spend a few minutes on these meetings, like just looking through some of these so that they don't just get that, kind of disappear, I think that'd be good. And some of them might be really old or
Wow,
need
this
re-triaging,
is
like this one.
Some of them are old.
Bowie. Yeah, it's been a minute.
He's pretty active on policy, network policy these days.
No, I know. Yes, I.
But yeah, it's been a while since
my desk is across, so I see Bowie a fair amount. But yes, it's been a while since I've seen him.
Tell him we're closing all of his issues. Just yell it and then close them.
Perfect.
Hey, boy, got some news about your issues. They have all been closed. Shane said so.
He said closing them without a comment is much better than them getting stale botted. So we're just going to do that. Okay. No, but in all seriousness, this one changes with listener set, does it not?
I mean, what it really does is it has this, I guess the same interaction I already covered with the connection coalescing. It has the potential to make that worse. I don't know. It would be useful, I think. I just am what I'm really. I think one of my takeaways from connection coalescing is that we have created an API that results in confusing outcomes for TLS. Would be a nice way of saying it. And I am continue to be interested in the idea of TLS, or at least certificates applying at a different level than listener. So maybe there's a way to support multiple certificates at one level, but maybe that level isn't listener.
You think this is still a pretty valid issue? It just might need some modernization.
Yeah. There's a lot of there's gonna be a lot of fascinating stuff about that one, actually, to try to get that right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if I feel like it's a question of a different level, or if it's a question of we have fewer levels or something like that. I'm not really sure.
I mean, one of the fundamental, I don't know how to, one of the points that can lead to confusion in our API surface right now is that we use a single field to indicate SNI and host matching and basically route selection, as you know, all of those things happen with this one field. And the underlying bits, that's not really how it works. And that has led to confusion, and this could further that. I'm interested, like, this has existed for a very long time. It has not, for a number of our issues that have existed this long, we've gotten a lot more emoji reactions, comments, something, suggesting broad community interest.
I think people are just afraid because it says TLS and certificates.
Fair.
Normally I would
say
laugh,
that jokingly, but I
Yeah.
think it's actually true, right? I think that there are probably a lot of people who look at this and go, "Oh my God, I'm not going to touch that one with a 10-foot pole."
Normally I
or a
would laugh, but I
3-meter
think that's
pole for those of
accurate.
you in Euro. Yeah, that is part of why this sort of thing is worrisome to me, is that it is dealing with an area of the world where details matter an awful lot, and there are a lot of people who don't feel like they understand the details well enough to get involved.
Yeah,
So.
anybody who says, "Hey, I want to work," although it does seem like we have somebody assigned to it, but I don't know how old that is. Seems like anybody who would want to assign themselves to this is signing up for multiple hours a week for many months to get it, to not just get it done, but also decide how it's going to be done, which extends the time even further. It's a big one, which I think, just to play devil's advocate, does beg the question of whether we should consider it a won't do or not. We have to keep our capacity and our pipeline in mind when we decide whether we're taking things on. And I think it's usually better to close the thing and say, we do not have the capacity for this right now. It can be reopened later, than to just leave it open lingering as if it were going to be prioritized.
I
think
agree
that's,
with you on that, unfortunately.
I think that is what Stillbot effectively does on our behalf, but in this case, it looks like it looks like it's going to close it on us pretty soon anyway. If it's already in rotten. So maybe we can accelerate the process of Stillbot and say, hey, listen, we've just run out of time. I don't know.
I'm fine with trying to put a nice message on there, which points out that it's like, it's not that we don't want to do this or we don't think it's valuable. We just can't see it getting prioritized right now. It is fair to ask for this to be reopened. We just need somebody to champion it forward if we do that.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. I'll take care of that.
All right. You're the best. Thanks, Shane. All right. Next up is defining how gateways should or should not interact with Gamma routing configuration. I don't think we can skip this one.
We could decide that we're just going to leave it undefined for a little while.
That's basically what we've done for now, is that, like, it's not well defined. Like, we haven't. Yeah.
Wait,
I feel like
Flynn, are you volunteering to get this into 1.3 here?
But that's 1.4. I believe.
I probably meant 1.4.
Okay.
Yeah, I do not believe that I was willing to. I don't think I was talking about 1.3 last month. So yeah, I would like to see this into 1.4 if we're going to do it at all.
Okay.
If we don't think that that's a sane thing, I would prefer to take Shane's option and close it rather than leave it lingering forever. Thank you, Christine. I appreciate that. But 1.3 is still a little.
Yeah, just with, like, for anybody who's interested in this issue and subscribe to it, the most important thing that I want is to not have the triage bot be the last thing they see. Just some message that says why. Like,
Okay. In this case,
So maybe
it feels like this is mislabeled on the Gamma board if we're still using that.
We
It
should
is
I
probably-
definitely
personally haven't
not
been tracking
done.
that very much.
Yeah, it is definitely not status done, anywhere.
Okay, I'll throw it back to do.
Did they get
Appreciate that.
triage closed at some point? Because that'll move it.
That's possible.
I think we should do something with it.
Okay, so
Like,
what I think we ought to do with this one seriously is let's try, because I think most of the people who are really interested in this one are likely to be at KubeCon. Let's try to talk about it in person at KubeCon a little bit. There are some interesting questions about both routing and mutual TLS that affect this strongly if we want to do something that's, in any way a standard sort of thing. And I think asynchronous conversation might be a reasonable next step here.
And like the other verdict might be that we just declare it is undefined behavior. Like that could be an outcome.
That could be a thing.
Yeah, we just don't want to leave an unresolved issue.
Yeah. We can just
Alright,
put a
let
note on
me-
this one that says that the only real issue here is cloud load balancers. Thanks very much, Google, and then just close it. That would be fine too.
Okay, sweet. What if I told you that cloud load balancers could maybe be capable of MTLS too, and then, it might not
Yeah,
be so
but you
painful.
see,
Ooh la la, c'est bon.
if it's all stuff in the cluster, then we can just mesh it and it's fine. But,
Sweet.
um,
Okay.
I'm
Seems like
I'm,
we've solved this.
I'm being a little mocking here. I'm sorry.
I'm signing up Flynn and Mike at least for this.
Yeah.
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 Sounds
Definitely.
good.
And
And between the
Let
two
me
of us,
know.
we'll figure out when we can do a meeting.
cool.
For anybody who is curious, Rob and I have had, I think, at least 2 offline discussions about possible ways we might be able to start approaching this sort of stuff, and they are complex. So
Yep.
Maybe
yeah.
fair to point out too, if we don't have any other agenda items, if anybody really does not want to sit through our triage, please don't feel obligated.
Also fair.
So what's next?
Cool. All right. So gateway routability. Dave, I don't know
yeah.
if you're still sticking around, but this was your thing. It was a very reasonable thing. Do you still want to see this move forward?
Who was pushing cluster IP gateways?
Yeah,
What happened with that?
it is still being pushed.
Uja
But
was
I
the
think
vendor?
cluster IP gateways, maybe there's some overlap here.
It looks
But
like the overlap's
the
about 100%.
idea behind cluster IP
Yeah.
gateways is more, at least my understanding is it's closer to cluster IP services in that it's this gateway that is implemented by default in Kubernetes and automatically gets a cluster IP. Maybe we could use the same mechanisms to give any gateway a cluster IP and layer on, I don't know, but what I would say is I would not expect this to mean, okay, so we should create a service and give it create a gateway means create a service and pull the cluster IP off of that service and onto the gateway. That is very much not what that direction is going. It's more of a.
That's a little interesting. I originally read this basically as we want a way for a gateway. We want a way to use a gateway that doesn't involve allocating a load balancer and just involves a cluster local service. So, and
Yeah, that's what this GIP was originally, and then evolved into like, well, there's cluster IP, then there's also load balancer types. So she's like, you have the enum and service, so it's like, how do you map it to the other one? Then it ballooned to, it's like, well, if there's public load balancers, then there's also private load balancers. So then,
Yeah.
And then I think it may have encroached on the DRA pod network stuff at some point too.
Yeah, I think there was a big pushback around what does it mean for one of the proposed values was internal, and what does that mean? because it's apparent, it's different for everyone, it seems. Yeah, cluster IP itself, I guess, is more straightforward, but I would kind
Yeah.
of like to see cluster IP gateway move a little bit more. And then we can, maybe we can build this on top or make this a requirement of cluster IP gateway work. I'm not sure, but if we can capture, if that is our primary goal here, yeah, I don't know.
For me, it was cluster IP. Everything else was just like.
Okay.
So if people want something more, we could work on it. But I guess yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, that's fair. Let me try and find Pooja's gap for this, and then I can, or PR or whatever. Yeah. So let me link this here, and
I also note that Envoy Gateway has a way that you can request that a gateway use a cluster IP, but it is a little weird, and it would be much nicer to have first-class support for that.
That was the reason for this whole gap, because like Istio, everyone has their own way, right? Like Istio has their own way. With Contour, you have to essentially create your own separate installation of Contour where you override the service, and then you infer the gateway class from that.
With
and
Envoy
so forth.
Gateway, I think you have to. I don't remember
You create
exactly
an
how it
Envoy
goes, but it
proxy resource.
Yeah, it involves adding at least one, maybe two CRDs, or maybe you add an Envoy proxy CRD, and then you have to link it the correct way. It
Yeah.
took a little while to sort that out.
Yeah, that one's not so bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, now
It's-
there's like five ways to do the same thing across the different implementations.
all right, well, maybe we can take one more issue and then call it good. I know we're trying to time box this, unless anyone wants to go further than that. In that case, the last one would be conflicting S and Is. Oh wow, this has some age to it as well.
Oh,
Has
God.
anyone looked at this recently?
No,
A
Sales
listener
has.
gateway can only select routes of one kind. Could you scroll up a moment?
Yeah. I mean, that is no
I don't
longer
think
true.
I agree with that. Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it was true at the time.
Yeah.
But,
But we can broadly interpret this as, has anybody looked at conflicts between HTTP route and TLS route, for example? And I think the answer to
yeah, I
that
mean,
is
I will
no.
say that gateways on GKE can only support a single route type at a time. Even in the future, if we add TLS route support, it would be a different kind of gateway. So this is not something that is
Okay, that feels weird to me, actually. But that's
hey,
that's an
don't blame.
entirely different discussion, right?
I know. I'm just saying this is not something that personally affects me. That's all I will
Can
say.
can gateways in GKE support HTTP routes and gRPC routes? Or is it still two different?
They
I'm just curious
no.
now.
Could they? Yes. Do they? No.
Okay.
So I don't know if there's anyone here that is running into this issue. That would probably be the best possible person to help solve this. This is a fun blast from the past. Look at previous iterations of this API.
Yeah. Uh-oh, Mattia touched it, so he has, but Shane did too, so.
So yeah, I mean, I
touch
think
all
the
of them.
idea of promoting TLS route will probably come back around. and this does feel like it's part of that. Yeah, that's man. Every maintainer has touched this recently, and still no. Yeah, okay. Okay. I don't have any clear solution to this one.
That seems like another one where maybe we can chat about it a bit at KubeCon.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, even if it's just chat about how we want to handle TLS route in upcoming releases, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. Nick made us promise to have less sessions than last time, so we've gotta make sure we limit it somehow. But no, that sounds good. Any last open items for us in this meeting? Cool. Well, thank you, everyone. Yeah, thank you, Shane, for suggesting triage. It was helpful to run through some things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry I put it right at the top. I remember. Okay, but yeah, sorry
I think you're good.
But yes, I think it's really good that we go through these some more. Even if we just go through like we did 4 of them, and every once in a while, we'll get it down eventually, and then we can start like once we're on top of them, we can get our humongous issue backlog, I think, slowly reasonable. We get there.
What do you I know in SIGNet when we do triage, we try to accept issues as legitimate or say they're not and close them out. I think a lot of the issues we have open are legitimate, and it's more of a question of, are we going to does anyone have time to deal with them?
SIG Network, in SIG Network, we do take a slightly different approach from what I'm advocating for here, which is we do just kind of things sit for very long periods of time. It is a different ecosystem. It is a different animal. So I guess if you're recognizing that in SIG Network, Gateway API has kind of worked a little bit like SIG Network in that we have a lot of issues, backlog. Many of them are potentially still valid. I think what I'm advocating for is that we don't do that with this project because it's the Greenfield project right now. It's one of the more Greenfield projects for SIG Network. And velocity is still very important.
Okay. All right. So I guess so it's not so much that we would triage, accept, or reject issues. It's more
I would be happy to have SIG Network like also I think everybody in SIG Network would be happier if the issues there were also better, but like one thing at a time. Like this is an area where we can do a little bit better, and it'll help everybody, including us. Like as maintainers, it's having these old issues laying around adds to confusion. So
maybe it's kind of like what we just did with like the issue that you tagged like me and Flynn on, where Flynn was like, yeah, I want to take care of this in the next release cycle. So like we spend the past like release cycle planning and talking about like what moves into standard from experimental, what new things are we gating into experimental. We didn't really spend a lot of time discussing like, are there issues that just need clarification or like time on them that are separate from like new features?
Yeah.
Makes sense. Cool. Yeah, that's a good thing to keep in mind for the next release. Cool. All right. Well, hopefully at KubeCon we'll be talking about everything coming in the next release of Gateway, which at that point will hopefully be 1.4. But with that, thank you everyone for your time. Have a good rest of your day, and we'll talk to you sometime.
Well,
thanks everyone.
Enjoy.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.